It's the end of the day and I'm just chilling in my flat and I thought, hey, I should do a currently reading video. I haven't done one this month yet and I am reading 3 books actively at the moment. So you guys might like to hear my thoughts on them so far. They are all really interesting, different books, so I am quite looking forward to telling you about them, and because for some of them in particular I have a lot of thoughts and undecided thoughts as well, so it will be really interesting to see how their plots develop. The first one is the one I'm sort of closest to the end of, and that is The Power by Naomi Alderman. This has been shortlisted for the Bailey's Women's Prize for Fiction, as has one of my other books, and this is the one that intrigued me the most of the shortlist, and that's because it is a kind of dystopian novel, so it's quite different from the rest of the books that have been shortlisted and were longlisted, and it has a recommendation from Margaret Atwood on the front. I'd also heard it was very fast paced, so I thought perhaps it might not be quite as well written, but actually I think it is really well written. It is very fast paced though, very fast moving, the plot never stands still, and it doesn't necessarily sit down and contemplate the characters in an in-depth study, but you do however get to hear the thought processes of some of the characters, so in that way you do get to know them through what's going on and what they're thinking about it as it's going on. Now the main event of the book is that essentially women have the power in their hands. This almost electrical physical power has manifested itself in young women, and young women can then ignite that power that already existed and is dwelling inside older women, so eventually most women have this power, which is basically that they can electrocute things by touch. They can do it to varying degrees, to the point where some people even like it at a small degree. It is just essentially giving women a physical strength that they didn't previously possess, and suddenly they are seen as a threat to men. And it's about the way this power affects our world. There's lots of different strands of how this happens. One of them is heavily religious and almost cult-like, a new manifestation of sort of Christianity, where they worship the mother, which is perhaps the bit that I find the least interesting in the book, just this religious theme. I find that it's quite a large part of the book, and although I don't dislike reading those bits, I always just feel a little bit like, why is that what so many people would jump to turn this into a religion and make it part of religion rather than it just being a physical scientific thing? I don't know, but then that's just how my brain works. So it's not my favourite bit of the book. I don't necessarily hate it, and it's just not my favourite bit. I like how Naomi Alderman makes observations that is done in a lot of good fiction that hands power over to women and makes them the kind of more powerful sex in a society, and that's that some of the same things that the characters get so angry and defensive about because they are a threat to men are things that are happening to women in our current society, and the same people don't get angry about and don't try and deal with it. It's like as soon as these problems are faced by men, a certain far-right groups are like, this is atrocious, but they wouldn't say that as they're happening to women. That's not obviously everybody, but there are groups like that. And I like that observation. I also think what she's doing quite well is looking at individuals' response to this new balance in power. Good and bad, different characters, different types of people, but I also wish there was maybe a wider variety of people. I think that would be interesting, because I think we're only getting very limited view into how a few people react in the situation. But then I also think it would be really difficult to include way more characters than it is, because she's done a really good job of exploring the characters that are in here, and I am really enjoying the book. I'm finding, like I said, really fast to read, really immersive, and lots of food for thought. That's perhaps an insight into some of the things I'm thinking at the moment, and I will be intrigued to see where it goes, because you start at the beginning, which is essentially 10 years before something happens, and we're gradually working ourselves closer and closer to the end of this 10 years, where I'm presuming something happens or there's a sort of new order established, and I'm really interested to see what that is. Before I go on to the next Bailey's shortlisted book though, I'm also reading a collection of poetry, and this is British Museum by Daljit Nagra. This is published by Faber, and it's my first collection of poetry by Daljit Nagra, although I do own one other of his books, so if I do enjoy this one I will definitely be picking up the next one. I have only read the first 3 poems in this. So I certainly don't have a fully established opinion on it yet. I was initially drawn to this collection by the title, not gonna lie. I love the British Museum, it's full of classical exhibitions, so it's a great deal of interest to me. But as much as I love it, it is also a representation of kind of British imperialism in the way that a lot of the artefacts have gotten into that museum in the past. And I know that this collection has both historical and political themes to it, so I'm really looking forward to getting a better impression of how the poet tackles those themes and where he goes with them. I think it's going to be really fascinating from what I've read so far of the first few poems. One of the other themes is migration to Britain and the integration of different cultures in Britain, so I think that's going to be really interesting. I'm finding that a lot recently with poetry collections is the first few are good but not amazing, and then once I've read a few more I kind of fall in love, because I think what I fall in love with is the collection as a whole and what the collection says rather than just 1 or 2 poems. Lastly though, I did say I was also reading another one of the Bailey's Women's Prize for Fiction shortlists, and that is Stay With Me by Ayobami Adebayo, and I'm actually listening to this one on audiobook, although I don't own the physical copy, so I'm going to hold this up. I started listening to audiobook a couple of days ago and I'm really enjoying it. I'm not sure what I expected from this one. It's one that I was interested in but wouldn't necessarily have been compelled to pick up if it wasn't for it being shortlisted. But the story follows Yejide, who is a Nigerian woman who hasn't been able to bear her husband a child, and it's about him taking a second wife because of pressure in his family to have a son, and that relationship, and it is set amidst some political turmoil in Nigeria in the 1980s. And although there's been hints at that so far, it's not been a major plot point, so I will be interested to see if that develops as one. But so far I'm still really enjoying the storyline. I think it's really interesting because although I don't have any reason to criticise polygamy or polyamorous relationships in relationships where 2 people are okay with that, this is an instance where one of the partners is not okay with the other partner having multiple wives, but because that kind of setup exists around her, she can't stop it from happening. So she's not consented to be one of multiple wives, and that's obviously really difficult for her. And also the way in which her mother-in-law treats her for not being able to bear a child and tells her that she's not a woman because she can't do the one thing that women are supposed to do. And so far it has honestly just been so heart-wrenching. It has been so sad and emotional, but that's a good thing because it's done a really good job of attaching me to our protagonist and making me feel for her. And I think any woman can identify with the pressure to fulfill certain roles as a woman and recognise the pressure that still exists even today to be a certain type of woman, or else you're not a proper woman. And although I obviously don't have the same experience as our protagonist, I feel so attached to her and I really care about her, and I'm finding it really emotional in a really good way. And I'm really glad I did pick this one up, and the audiobook is very good as well. I'm enjoying the narrator, so I will let you know what I think of this once I'm done as well. But those are the books I'm currently reading and wanted to chat to you about. Do let me know if you have picked any of them up or are planning on picking any of them up. I'd love to chat about them with you. What are you currently reading? Anything particularly good? Until next time though, happy reading, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye!